Okay. Hello, welcome to the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. I'm Laura Stoner, and I'm here with Michael Summers, and we are interviewing you about your experiences in the Vietnam War. We have Paige Newman and Danny Flakes is recording the interview. It is October 26, 2023. So may I ask you your full name?
Michael Francis with an I, Summers,
Uh-huh. And where were you born?
Richmond, Virginia, Grace Hospital, I believe,
And what year?
1952, October 16.
And what were your parents' names?
Joseph F. Summers and Marjorie M. Summers.
And what did they do for a living?
My dad mostly was a clerk at scrap iron yard for many years, Frank H. Knight, over off Chamberlain Avenue. I don't think it's still there, but changed names. My mother was just a housewife and did some part-time nursing aid later in life.
Did you have any siblings?
Uh, had five other siblings, and there's only me and my sister left. The others have all passed away. Three brothers.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, yeah, me too.
So, where did you go to high school?
Catholic schools, St. Patrick's, 1 through 4 grades, uh, Sacred Heart on Perry Street, 4th through the 8th, back to St. Patrick's on Churchill for 9 and 10 grades, and then to Cathedral Central, 1300 Floyd Avenue for the senior year. I believe that building now belongs to the VCU School of Dance. It was all nuns taught us.
So, how did your parents, like, within the switching of going to schools, how did your parents decide where you were going?
Oh, it was definitely going to be a private or Catholic parochial school, no question. That they all went to the same school, St. Patrick's. My dad, his sisters all went to St. Patrick's. We all lived on Churchill. They lived on Churchill, and we lived across the street from the high school and around the corner from the elementary school, so we couldn't really miss school.
um, so, when did you first become aware of the Vietnam War? Because you graduated from high school in
I
1970.
graduated in 1970, June 1970. Probably senior year is when I was developing views against it. And I believe one day I wore a black band into a history class, and the nun gave me hell. And I earned the nickname Commie. It's in my yearbook under my picture, even though I wasn't a commie.
Uh-huh.
But we had a lot of heated discussions
So, did
in the senior year about that, and a lot of my fellow men classmates were not interested in going, had no reason to go, no desire.
Did the draft play a role in any of your discussions?
I'm sorry, did the who?
The draft.
Oh, the draft. That was a big part of it. Luckily, when it came to me, I had a draft card. I ended up tearing it up after about a year, but shortly after I got the draft card, they went to the lottery, and I had a very high number, and they didn't get anywhere near it. But if some friends of mine had low numbers, and they were planning on going to Canada, they weren't going to serve in what we figured was an undeclared, unjust war.
How were you getting your information about the Vietnam War?
Mostly from, I guess, network TV. At that time, there was only the three major broadcasts, and CBS did a lot of the reporting from the war. Saw it on nighttime every night at dinner time,
Mm-hmm.
and that really brought it home to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And in class discussing it. But of course, the nuns were all patriotic, which is fine, but they didn't like people that didn't want to go to the war. They was in full support of it, misguided like a lot of folks.
So, when you graduated, you knew that the draft was not going to be a problem for you. What were your plans for your future?
I didn't really have any, to tell you the truth. We were, just out of high school, moved into the fan district, hooked up with some, I guess you'd call them hippies. Did a lot of partying, a lot of smoking weed, a lot of mushrooms, LSD, you name it. It was drugs plentiful, cheap, hashish. We just partied, had a good time. We weren't really worried about it, but we weren't going to be drafted into the army and end up in Vietnam and end up dead.
Did you have a job at that time?
Oh yeah, I probably had quite a few construction type jobs. Worked for Richmond redevelopment housing in the South Side project. I can't remember the name of it, but we did those type of jobs. Worked for the city, picking up leaves, construction. We took off a lot of times on jobs. We worked construction downtown, building when they were putting the skyscrapers downtown. Worked in the holes when they were mud holes in the wintertime. A bunch of us that all had on the same job site, and we'd work maybe a month, 2 months, quit, and go hiking for 2 weeks on the Appalachian Trail, come back, find another job. Back then, when you had long hair, wasn't too many people hire you.
So like you were talking about maybe like the James Center
Oh,
when they were building the James Center?
actually, it was one of the ones on Main Street, right on the corner of 8th or 9th and Main. There was a couple buildings downtown that we worked in when dead of winter, rain and muddy. But it paid good money, and they didn't care about your hair, and there wasn't no drug tests. Because we would have failed them.
So did you go to the protest on July 4th in 1970 in Washington, D.C.?
I did indeed. I had heard it was going to be there, and I bought a bus ticket on a Greyhound bus and rode up, and I was glad I went. It was the first time I'd ever been to a big protest like that. It was an amazing scene. They were having the Bob Hope Honor America show down in the basin below and it was fenced off. And the Yippies party had called a protest against the anti-war for Vietnam for that day on that particular day, and they were all hanging out at the Washington Monument Mall grounds. And they had people up in trees with cigar boxes full of marijuana joints rolled in red, white, and blue papers, tossing them to the crowd. People were openly smoking weed, and the people coming to the Bob Hope America show had to walk through all that, and they were like totally shocked. They were fearful for their lives. The expression on their face wasn't nobody bothering them. A real dichotomy of cultures clashing, and it wasn't used to it. I think the American Nazi Party had people there. A few days earlier, they did 2 days of protest. I didn't see them, but it was a crazy scene. Thousands of young people, and also them, what I'd call straight people that came for patriotism. Bob Hope, Billy Graham was there. It was a scene.
Yeah. Did you, so how did you protest?
I just was there mainly to observe and just see what was going on. I didn't partake in any violence. At some point, an ice cream truck pulled onto the mall grounds, and the crowd surrounded it and started shaking it side to side, yelling free ice cream. Next thing you know, all these ice cream bars are flying out the window. I think they ended up pushing it into the reflecting pool. And at that point, the police, who had been a big presence there, started firing tear gas, but the wind changed and it blew back on the policemen, and they weren't wearing their masks. And then it went into the Bob Hope show. And it didn't affect the crowd so much, but I did get some of it. It was pepper gas, and of course people started scrambling and running through the streets. And it's probably the first time I'd been in D.C. by myself. I was just running, and I was gassed, caught some of it. Burning eyes, couldn't see where you were going, trying to run, and mass chaos of all this going on. But that was most of the violence that I saw. Later in the evening, though, the crowd had surrounded the outside of the Bob Hope America thing, and they had a police cordon about 3 deep, and the crowd was throwing bottles at the police, which was dumb. You don't do that. You don't expect not to have trouble, and it was surging back and forth. But Oh, and the funny thing was the crowd was shouting out, trying to drown out the show. Bob Hope smokes dope. Pretty crazy, but I didn't toss any bottles or anything. I was just standing there observing. And I think later on, in the evening, 11 o'clock or so, found my way back to the bus station, got on the bus and came home. And it was probably a few days later, I was living in an apartment complex on Grace Street. I forget the side street, in the Fan. And a fellow that went to RPI, which is now VCU, from New York, he was a Yippie and he had been up there for that event. And he gave me the Yippie flag, that one of them that was flown. It wasn't the official. I believe the one the Yippie party had was the Viet Cong flag, a white with a blue star. But this one had a black background, a red star, and a marijuana leaf in the middle of it. And that's what he gave me a few days after that event. And I kept it for 50 years and then donated it to Ms. Newman and the museum. And they restored it. And I'd like to have a look at it if I could while I'm here. But I know I was supposed to make arrangements. It's no big deal. I know what it looks like. I got pictures of it.
So why did he give you the flag?
He just asked me did I want it. He said, hey, I got some here. You want this? This was at the protest. I said, sure, I'll take it.
Hmm.
And I took it. I think I kept it in a drawer most of those years, so it wasn't damaged all that bad.
Mm-hmm.
For historical sake only.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I didn't consider myself a Yippie. I didn't agree with their violent tactics.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept it anyway. I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
I could have sold it on eBay probably for any amount of money, but I decided to give it to history.
So you consider yourself a hippie, and these people are yippies.
Right.
Did hippies protest with yippies?
Oh, they probably did, but I don't know that many hippies were actually doing bombings and things like whatever the violent things
The
that
rioting.
the hippies did.
Uh-huh.
They did quite a lot. They were the extremists. And what's funny is the founder, Jerry Rubin, he became a Wall Street banker and made a lot of money. He did a complete turnaround. And the other fellow who had the book, Steal This Book, Abbie Hoffman, he died penniless, homeless, and penniless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you, it seems like there's different types of movements that are going on during the Vietnam War. There's the anti-war movement that kind of came out of the civil rights movement.
Right.
And seem to be kind of more like, we're going to be very respectful and we're going to be very, it's kind of based out of church kind of groups.
Right.
And then there's the Yippie movement, which seems to be just kind of like chaos.
Right.
Did you perceive any of that when you were in, kind of observing, not necessarily participating, but observing?
Oh, yeah. Well, I stopped going to church after I started doing LSD. I got more religion out of doing trips than I did from 12 years at Catholic school. I just gave up on religion, organized religion, and I didn't care for it much after that, still don't. I noticed all the divisions, but we just stayed out of the fray. We were just young guys living together in the Fan, doing what we wanted to do when we wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty free and easy lifestyle back in those days, even though you had to worry about getting busted all the time.
Yeah. During the protest that you went to in DC, nobody was concerned about, like, there were just too many of you to be busted at that point, so people weren't concerned?
Oh, no, there was too many. If they were trying to arrest everybody that was smoking dope, they'd have had the biggest riot ever seen in D.C. probably. They weren't bothering anybody.
Mm-hmm.
They might not have liked what they saw. But it was a pretty chaotic scene all day long, a lot of tension, a lot of back and forth with police, people scrambling. I didn't see anybody really hassling the people that were coming to see the Bob Hope show, although the reverse was not the same. They were coming through calling us names, dirty hippies, and take a bath and all this kind of mess. But we didn't pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
I just went up there to see what was going on and catch a buzz.
Did you talk to your family about that you were going?
Oh, I told them afterwards. Yeah, they didn't necessarily agree with it, but they respected it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Um, do you, did you have any feelings about the things like in 1970, there was like the Cambodian invasion and Kent State happened? Um, did that change any of your feelings or did it more entrench you
Oh,
in your?
yeah, definitely more entrenchment. It turned me against the government. I didn't really trust the government. I thought they were wrong to do an illegal invasion. It was, all totally illegal. I thought Congress was supposed to declare war before you send troops, not invade other countries, and they were just blowing the heck out of people. I remember once Spiro Agnew came to the Coliseum to give a speech, and a bunch of us guys, about 6 of us went, and we were yelling out, and he'd stop speaking, we'd yell out, Agnew is a bozo. And the crowd was, one guy got up, wanted to fight us, and we ended up telling him where to go. But that was a lot of tension. But Agnew was on the stage cheering on the crowd across the way at the Coliseum. Some people in the crowd were beating up on the protesters, and Agnew was like, "Yay, yay!" And afterwards, we went to the hotel. I think it was the one on Fifth Street, the Bird, maybe. And then we were on the opposite side of the street yelling obscenities because he was in the hotel, but they had police in the middle of the street keeping us apart. But it didn't turn violent.
Mm-hmm.
Only about 100 people there. But at least we went down there and said our piece about Agnew. We made a lot of people angry, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, did you ever feel like, how did you find these events that you decided you wanted to go to
I,
express your feelings?
I think I heard about it through the grapevine. Back then, there was a lot of communication between people passing the word on the street. Somebody said, hey, there's a big protest, smoke in. It was actually the very first spot, smoke in, and they still have one every year ever since.
Uh-huh.
And now, of course, it's legal in 25 states.
So, where have the smoke-ins, are they usually in Richmond?
I'm sorry?
Are the smoke-ins that you attend in Virginia,
Right.
are they usually in Richmond?
Uh, I don't know there was any organized one. They had a lot of free concerts in Monroe Park back in the day. Bruce Springsteen came down with his band from Jersey, Steel Mill. Allman Brothers played there, Tower of Power.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Lee Lewis. And people that came there were openly smoking and nobody ever bothered them.
Mm-hmm.
Every Sunday they were totally free concerts.
That sounds really nice.
Oh yeah, there was a lot going on back in those days.
Um, did you interact at all with the VCU students?
I went to VCU for one semester probably in the late 80s, and I probably did almost 2 years worth of at J. Sargent Reynolds in night classes or full-time day classes, liberal arts, but I never completed it.
Mm-hmm. But did you find like-minded people at J. Sarge or
Oh, most
VCU?
definitely. Most definitely. It was a spirit back in those days, even though there was a lot of striking going on. People hung together, at least young people sort of banded together and looked out for each other.
Mm-hmm. Um, so did you ever fear that you were going to be arrested for your activities?
Oh, all the time. All the time. Actually, me and a friend of mine got busted years later in the 70s, right across the street from where my high school was. And neither one of us had any dope. We'd been drinking alcohol all day, going to a party, April Fool's party, and police had raided looking for a roommate who was on probation who had been selling speed or something. We had just moved in with this guy, we didn't even know him. And he wasn't even there. And we got arrested, and it's still on my record. I went to the University of Richmond and looked up my record. I was supposed to be expunged, didn't get it, and it's still on there. It said I had a half ounce of pot, and we didn't have any at all.
Uh-huh.
And I could have appealed it, but I was like, what the heck, I don't care.
Yeah, but still, that's upsetting, but
And
it wasn't
back in
true.
those days, you usually got a standard, like $1,000 fine and suspended sentence, but I didn't get any of that. We had a attorney, Calvin Venable, and we appealed it in front of Judge Wilkinson. I couldn't stand him. He was in my opinion, a real Nazi, mean judge. He told me to get a haircut, and I'd already cut a bunch of hair off. And then he told my lawyer to get a haircut. And the lawyer's like, "We're not here for that, Your Honor." And then the judge asked me what my hobbies were. I said, hiking, camping. He said, check into the military. They got a great program. I said, no thanks, I'll pass on that. He was real mean, but they put me on probation. And I smoked more dope on probation because they didn't have any drug tests. And my probation officer couldn't even pronounce half of the drugs he was asking me had I done. I didn't attempt to correct him. But it's not like today, you can't get away with that kind of stuff now. They just started that mess.
Yeah, they're a lot stricter with drug.
We got to ride in the back of one of the ice cream trucks, the paddy wagons, but they didn't handcuff us.
Well, I guess that makes it a little more enjoyable of a ride if you're not.
And it was kind of fun. I always wondered what it was like in the back of there. It's no fun being in there though. And they took us down, it was a Saturday evening, they took us down, we were in a general lockup cell. For a couple hours, they let us out on personal recognizance. I'm getting booked and photographed. One policeman comes in, "Who's Summers?" I said, "That's me. I went to school with your dad." I was like, big effing deal. I could care less. He turned around and walked out the room. Well, we walked we had to walk home to the family. There wasn't no buses. We went to the party. Everybody said, "Y'all are late. Where you been?" We said, "We just got out of jail." They said, "No, I ain't no April Fool's joke either." They wouldn't believe us. It was a crazy night.
Yeah. It's funny that you got out so, quickly.
Oh yeah, well back then, if something like that, they let you out on personal recognizance. You promised to come to court.
Uh-huh.
And we were in front of the first judge, I can't remember his name, he was a district court judge, mean as hell. My aunt went with me. We came in and she said, "That's a mean man." He ended up getting busted, disbarred, thrown off the bench years later because they caught him stealing alcohol out of the police lockup. It was a grumpy old dude, I forget his name.
Oh,
He was alcoholic, he'd fall asleep on the behind the bench. The bailiff had to wake him up.
times were different.
Yeah, it was definitely different.
Um, do you feel like your activism accomplished what you wanted?
Oh yeah, stress-free life. Yes, in '76, after we tried going on the Appalachian Trail, and two of our buddies got picked up by somebody who got them out of the car and took off with their backpacks. We decided we'd had enough of Richmond. We moved to Nelson County, below Wintergreen a little ways. A buddy that we knew who lived with had 10 acres. We moved up there in the summer of '76, camped out in a lean-to for several months, started building a cabin with no power tools, had no electricity, got water out of a creek. And one night we were sitting around in late summer, and somebody's driving up this road, and it was a really rutted out road. Nobody could make it except a sturdy vehicle. It was a wintergreen ambulance who brought a farmer up named Ray Falls, who had a Charolais cattle farm. He came up to see the cabin, how we were doing. He ended up offering us a home in the middle of one of the cow fields for free. We became his farm hands. He took us to the local registrar, got us registered as Democrats, and he got us a job at Wintergreen making snow. And we stayed on his property for 2 or 3 years, rent-free.
Huh. So what was his motivation in that deal?
What was his what motive?
Motivation, was it just that he needed labor to take
He
care
was
of the
on
cattle?
Route 151 on the road up to Wintergreen.
No, what was the labor force? Did he need people to work the farm?
Oh yeah, he had 200 head of Charolais cattle. He had a financier partner, a retired Army colonel who came occasionally, but he didn't have any, his children were grown, he only had daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And we became his farmhand. There was like 6 of us.
Mm-hmm.
Lived in his house, had wood stove heat, no running water, outside Johnny house. We loved it, right in the middle of one of the fields. I think he had like 200 acres and maybe 300 head of cattle. Took baths in the river with the cattle. It was nice life living in the country, no worries at all.
Uh-huh. So then what did you do after that?
Came back to Richmond, and worked many jobs, a long distance telephone operator. When they first started hiring men for about 3 years, I worked for banks, Genworth, temp services. I've had many, many jobs over the years.
Mm-hmm. But the cattle job was the best job?
I think so, yes. I enjoyed that the most.
Do you ever think of being a farmer yourself?
Uh, it'd be nice, but you gotta have money and you gotta have land, and these days it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't mind doing it, but I'm too old now.
Um, what do you think were the biggest challenges you faced in your activism against the war?
Mm, Being disowned by people, people look down on you. I didn't really worry about it. I could care less what other people think. I thought I was right and they were wrong. Didn't matter what they thought.
Did any of your brothers go get drafted?
Actually, my older brother, he joined the army and he was stationed in Korea working with nuclear battlefield weapons that you fired from howitzers, but they never had to use them. But he was on the front lines of Korea, and I wasn't interested in signing up for the military, and nobody else in my family signed up for military.
Did you and your brother ever talk about his service?
Oh yeah, all the time. But he was a pothead over there in Korea too. All the soldiers over there were smoking weed too. Germany, I knew people that was soldiers in Germany. I knew a guy nowadays who used to command troops in Germany. He didn't care what his troops did on the weekend, as long as they showed up for duty and did their duty.
Mm-hmm.
Things were a whole different look and perspective back in those days.
They didn't do any drug testing
No,
during
that was long before drug test.
Uh-huh.
And they still don't have one that can detect psychedelics.
But do you think that your brother's service, did it have any influence on how you felt about the
Not at
Vietnam
all.
War?
That was his choice. I had no problem with it either way. I found the stories he told interesting.
Mm-hmm. Um, so how did you feel when the Paris Peace Accords ending the war were announced in 1973?
It was nice that they brought an end to it, but it should have never gotten started in the first place. We should have learned from the French. The French got kicked out, and Kennedy got us in. And I think actually years later, it turned out the CIA had a part in mining the harbor that really got the thing going. It turned out they had their dirty hands in it, so, should have never happened. A lot of wasted lives. And now, go to any store, pick up a product, Dollar General, Family Dollar, made in Vietnam. I bought a shirt made in Vietnam, Cambodia recently. It's amazing. You fight them, then you end up being trading partners with them, and all them guys die for nothing.
Mm-hmm. So did you maintain your activist work or interest after the conclusion of the U.S.
No,
involvement?
I really wasn't much of an activist. We were just more hippies enjoying life and, the freedom of the 70s, even though there was a lot of tension. As I said, in the fan district, there was a plentiful and cheap amount of entertainment, illegal. It kept everybody satisfied. We were going to concerts,
Mm-hmm.
seeing people. I followed Grateful Dead from 76 to 95. Probably saw 60 or 70 shows, which is a drop in the bucket. I've met people that went to hundreds of shows, traveled from coast to coast 3 times a year. living on the road. That was the life.
Yeah.
But I didn't go that route. I had jobs. I'd go to a show 3 nights a week in a row, drop acid, drive up, come back, go to work next day, same thing next 2 nights, no problem.
Mm-hmm. So you're basically just working to live the
Exactly.
lifestyle that you wanted to live.
Right, exactly. We lived in the fan quite a few years, and that was the party place, a lot happening.
How do you feel about the gentrification of the fan? Like how it's become, it's overall real estate is very expensive.
Oh, it's gotten out of hand. It's ridiculous, and people in the fan tore off those nice porches, covered porches. Now they got no place to sit in the sun. I was like, this is stupid. They should have fixed it up instead of tearing it down. Real estate's way out of hand, but it's all driven by money, capitalism. Everybody wants to make money. People are coming in and buying up abandoned property, especially in South Richmond where I live. A house goes on the market, it's sold in less than a week, and somebody's in there tearing it out, fixing it up, and charging way too much money. I don't want to live next door to somebody which I can hear them every time they burp. Yeah, I ain't got that kind of money. If I'm gonna pay that money, I want to be somewhere where I can't see a neighbor.
Yeah.
It's gotten out of hand.
They're moving something upstairs.
So it's through.
I think it might be like a whole pallet or something.
Yeah, houses in the fan used to be reasonable back in the '70s. Now they're just outrageously high. I don't know how
Even-
people can afford them.
But even the rent is
Anywhere.
crazy.
And as many apartments and condos and townhouses as they're putting all over Richmond, I can't imagine that many people coming here or paying them exorbitant prices. They got more money than me.
Mm-hmm. It's the Northern Virginia, I guess.
Oh
people
yeah,
come
it's
in.
further up north.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any impressions when you heard that Saigon had fell after we left?
Yes, I thought that the Vietnamese army itself gave up and didn't put up a fight, but it was inevitable. You can't win a guerrilla war, and especially when you've got another country, imperialists, coming in trying to take over or fight against you. It was a sad ending. It was a pretty chaotic scene. A lot of people didn't get out. I imagine a lot of people got killed that were on the side of the South.
Mm-hmm.
Another failed war. But like my dad used to say, we should have done something to win it instead of just fighting it. We could have won that war, but they didn't want to do what needed to be done, which they could have dropped a couple of nukes, which isn't really a good thing to do, but it'd have been over. But they didn't really fight it. I think it was driven by the military and industry trying to make money and building equipment and munitions.
Mm-hmm. Do you think your activism affected your later life in terms of career choices, friendships, and your political views?
Most definitely, yeah. I know people today that I don't associate with because they're Trumpers, brainwashed in my opinion, but they come up with all these excuses. But it caused rifts in my family. My brother, he was a Republican, and we always had heated arguments about that, but we got over it. It definitely affected it. I'm more liberal minded, but not quite as far left as some.
Mm-hmm. But you feel like you haven't, it seems like people kind of, depending on their lives, they
Oh yeah,
flip,
well I have friends that, are all political persuasions. I don't really care about all that so much. It's how you act as a human being.
Mm-hmm. What would you say, from your perspective, is the biggest misconceptions about activists during the Vietnam War?
That they were traitors, that they were communists. People thought that they were just trying to cause trouble and split the country apart. Actually, they were trying to show people the errors of getting involved in a conflict overseas that we had no business being in the first place. And if those people wanted to live like communists, let them, you know, we're not the policemen of the world, we can't save everybody. If they don't like it, they can leave, otherwise, you know, you get what you vote for or put up with.
Mm-hmm. Looking back, is there anything that you would have done differently in your involvement with the activism? I know you weren't really
I
like,
probably would have might have liked to have gotten more vocal and involved and it been less of a party animal, but at the time, it didn't really, you know, affect me. I wasn't going to go out and start throwing things at police or causing trouble, burning and destroying things. Wasn't much I could do about it.
yeah.
Go with the flow.
Well, I mean, hindsight is always, kind of
Oh yeah,
2020.
for sure.
And being young, it's hard to have the perspective of like,
Probably one thing I really would have done more would have started going to more Grateful Dead shows more often
because
earlier.
because it was going to end at some
They
point.
did a killer show at the mosque that's out online, and I wasn't going in. I didn't get into them until '76, and they'd been around since '68. I was a little late to the bus, but I made up for it.
Do you know how many times the Grateful Dead? We'll just wait for the sound. Do you know how many times the Grateful Dead came to Richmond?
At least 5 or 6. They, let's see, at one point they had been banned from Richmond after they made a bunch of arrests for people selling acid out in the parking lot, which everybody did, people traveling. And they had undercover guys with short hair and tie-dye. You don't sell LSD to somebody like that. But anyway, they abandoned a bunch of the businesses, major hotels downtown. 10 or 12 of them came to the city council complaining, like, are you crazy? They brought in $1 million in 2 days. And so they banned them in Hampton because they were having crowd control. So they punked them. This was back in the early 90s. They booked under the original name, the Warthogs, and Hampton let them come, and it was Grateful Dead. All the Deadheads knew it, but they punked them, so they got in under the band, and they pulled out songs they hadn't done in 12 and 22 years, 2 shows. I was at both of them. They were the classic shows of the East Coast that year, the best. I'd say they probably came 6, 7 times a year, and also Jerry Garcia band came several times. I saw them. All the musical groups came here, yes, and Elton John at the Coliseum. I saw Emerson, Lake and Palmer at the Richmond Arena, the Allman Brothers when they were still alive. They are, nowadays nobody hardly comes to big name rock acts, no place to play really.
Yeah.
But we saw lots of shows back then, everybody came to Richmond.
The Coliseum is abandoned now. And they're trying to decide what to do with it.
Yeah, Bruce Springsteen and Steel Mill played on top of the 8th Street parking deck one summer under the name Steel Mill. It was only about 200 people showed up.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was free too.
We're wrapping up on questions, but let me see. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions you wish I would ask you?
No, probably not answers that you want answered. I'll volunteer. I estimated. I sat down a while back, just as a fact, estimate how many times I might have done psychedelics, mushrooms, mescaline, or LSD, or peyote. Probably between 600 and 650 times. Since the 70s. I tell people that, they think I'm bulling them. But I would do it again in a heartbeat. I used to do 3 hits in a night, one hit every 2 hours apart. But it's not something for everybody. It's not something for a paranoid schizophrenic or somebody with mental health problems. But I tell people I found God on LSD.
Well, it seems like reevaluating psychedelics now,
Oh, they
for
are.
therapeutic uses.
Psychiatric hospitals are investigating it. Oregon just decriminalized psilocybin. I have to move out there. I enjoyed it. I even went to church a couple times doing LSD, and that was a strange experience.
I can imagine.
But believe me, I was more religious on LSD than I ever was in a church for 12 years at Catholic school. But that's just me.
That's your spiritual experience with that.
I think there's a Ken Burns on Buffalo documentary on right now on PBS. A friend told me they talked to an Indian who does peyote, an older guy. He said, white man goes to church and prays to God to come and help him. He said, I take peyote, you go in my teepee, and I'm with Jesus.
Yeah.
I agree with that, but if you haven't done it, you don't know. A lot of people are off on that, turned off by that, but I talk about it all the time. I told people we could have stopped wars if we had an acid bomb big enough to dose everybody, incapacitate them. Maybe they'd end up hugging and dancing instead of killing each other.
You never know.
You never know. It'll never happen though. It can't be viable enough to concentrate on the open air. The military tried that though in the 70s. The Army was looking into that, using it as a battlefield weapon to incapacitate, but it didn't work.
It's interesting. Do you have any questions, Paige, you want to ask about for exhibition purposes?
I think we got most of it when you donated the flag.
Right. Yeah, I can't think of anything else that I could add to it. I probably could, but I might be boring you too.
No, not at all. No, nothing's come to mind because you asked questions that, excuse me, that I was like, oh, ask, and you did ask. So just the background, like family background, yeah. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was happy that y'all wanted it because I couldn't believe anybody still wanted something like that old. And I'm amazed as many, I bet you I've moved 40 or 50 times in my lifetime in and around town and out of town, and still have it after all that time. I feel lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It must have meant something to
Oh,
you.
there's not a lot of that. I'm looking forward to being able to see it on display at the exhibition. People told me, why didn't you sell it for money? You need money. I said, no, I don't need that. I said, I've gotten along this far, being half poor. I can go a little further. I'd rather give it away to somebody to enjoy it, save it. Because if I'm gone, somebody will go through my things, throw stuff away, valuable stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we appreciate your generosity.
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us and giving us your information.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for interviewing me.